10 days ago, the Boston Bruins were absolutely embarrassed by the Senators in Ottawa. Last night at home, they earned a win over that same team, proving the embarrassment of last week actually saved their season. What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Beat. Today is Friday, November 7th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's episode, we are going to discuss last night's 3-2 victory over the Ottawa Senators and the remarkable turnaround that the Boston Bruins have experienced since last week's loss to those same Senators. A 7-2 loss. It was a disaster, an embarrassment. We're going to break down what has changed, the defense, the buy-in, the emergence of a new identity under Marco Sturm. Then we're also going to look at what it means heading into Saturday's Hall of Fame game in Toronto, where our own Zdeno Chara will be honored. And Patrice Bergeron's words remind us of what Bruins leadership really means. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. That's X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and I have been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for nearly 20 years. A lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and last night's win was pretty thrilling. Charlie McAvoy dancing around the offensive zone late in overtime, doing like 2 full twirls around, trying to set up some opportunities. Finally, it got on the stick of Pavel Zacha, who was able to get the game winner. Looking back to October 27th, that appears to have been a real turning point in this season. The Bruins were blown out 7-2 in Ottawa, their 7th loss in 8 games, and you could tell that they were just downright embarrassed after that one. Sean Kuraly, who scored last night, reintroducing the Kuraly leap to the Boston faithful. He admitted after that 7-2 loss that they rolled over and went down without a fight. And it was especially disheartening because they had just ended a 6-game losing streak with the win over the Colorado Avalanche 2 days before. Then they come out and drop an absolute stinker against the Senators, a game in which they allowed Ottawa to score 4 power play goals on 5 different opportunities. And head coach Marco Sturm was pretty blunt after that one. You've got to buy in or not. Ottawa did. We didn't. Again, this was 10 days ago. There was also a clip going around on Bruins social of Marco Sturm really challenging the players in the locker room. Turns out that was from a loss to Anaheim prior to that, but still the message was sent. They're showing off the same things they did last season where they bottomed out. They've had all summer to think about it, and they're still not delivering and still not showing some pride in the spoke to beat. 10 days later, last night, Ottawa came into Boston, and this time it was a gritty 3-2 overtime win for Boston. Charlie McAvoy set up Zacha with 5.6 seconds left in OT, sealing the team's 5th straight victory. And they're now 2 games over 500 for the first time since they went 3-0 to begin the season. And Kuraly summed it up again, talking about the turnaround. We thought this team today was a different team than it was 10 days ago. We had to get better out of necessity, and it showed. And you can see the transformation the Bruins have undergone since October 27th. The first 11 games, they had allowed 3.82 goals per game, which was fourth most in the NHL. During this 5-game win streak, only 2.2 goals per game allowed, a major improvement. They had been allowing 13.4 high danger chances per 60 at 5-on-5 through October 27th. During this 5-game win streak, they've limited that to 9.75, showing tighter structure. The penalty kill, again, 4 power play goals allowed versus Ottawa. Since then, 1 power play goal on 16 opportunities against the Boston Bruins, a 93.8 success rate. Huge rebound. And the key to that has been goaltending. Over the past 5 games, they've been getting elite goaltending from Jonas Korpisalo, who's got 3 straight wins, 90 saves on 97 shots for a .928 save percentage. Swayman's been just as good, a .934 save percentage in his last 2 starts. And Ottawa's high danger chances dropped from 12 in the 7-2 loss to just 4 in the 3-2 overtime win for the Boston Bruins. Boston is finally executing Marco Sturm's structure, and they're buying in all up and down the lineup, giving that extra effort. And Kuraly summed it up again. You start giving up goals, you think you need to do more. But the message was simplify and just do your job. This team has learned that discipline and patience, not panic, leads to results. And this turnaround isn't just about luck, it's identity taking shape. And again, you're seeing that buy-in among the Bruins players. Go back to that 6-game losing streak even. So disheartening, discouraging, led a lot of us to believe that the Bruins were what they were last season. But you look at the scores, the opposition, they played the likes of Vegas, Colorado, Utah, Tampa. They lost a lot of those games by just 1 goal. Last season, there were so many times where they would have gotten down against better teams and then allowed the score to get away from them. 6-1 results, 7-1, 8-1. During that losing streak, they were still able to keep it pretty tight. 4-3 loss to Tampa, 6-5 to Vegas, 4-1 to Colorado, but then they lost 3-2 to Utah, 4-3 to the Panthers, and then that 7-5 loss to Anaheim, in which Marco Sturm kind of lost it in the locker room. But to keep it within a goal against the likes of Tampa, Vegas, Utah, who's become a bit of a mammoth in the Western Conference, the defending Stanley Cup champions, those were signs that they weren't necessarily the same old Bruins and just kind of, or not same old Bruins, but last year's Bruins, and they were still sticking in it. And you would hope that that would eventually bleed into some wins once the schedule kind of balanced out and the competition became a bit more level. We're seeing that over the past 5 games. They've got a huge game coming up on Saturday against the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Hall of Fame game where Zdeno Chara and Joe Thornton will be honored prior to puck drop. We'll preview that one later on in the podcast. But coming up, we're going to talk more about some of the key personnel and the grinder identity that is really fueling Boston's win streak. Let's be real, fellas. Making excuses does not solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired. It happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiette makes it easy to get started. You connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms or in-person appointments, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. Fast, simple, private process, all handled by real doctors. Visit rugiet.com/lockedonnhl to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/lockedonnhl. Don't forget to use our code LOCKEDONNHL so they know we sent you. Rougiette, stop making excuses and start making moves. Last season, the Boston Bruins were pretty bad, and for good reason. If you lose your top two defensemen, you're going to struggle. Hampus Lindholm was out for the majority of the season. Just around this time last year, he suffered that fractured kneecap, was not able to return. Charlie McAvoy, of course, was injured at the Four Nations face-off, and it was after that point they decided to sell off a lot of their pieces. They went on that extended losing streak, bottomed out, drafted James Higgins. The rest is history. You've got those two guys back now and playing at their peak abilities. And it's no coincidence that this defensive surge began the moment Hampus Lindholm returned from injury. He's missed 8 games this season, but the Bruins are 7-1 with him in the lineup. And his stability has reconnected Boston's back end. Andrew Peeke has stepped up next to him. We'll talk about Peeke a little later on here as the winner of a new Boston Bruins award that they're giving out post-game. Charlie McAvoy is absolutely flourishing alongside Nikita Zadorov. Charlie McAvoy now sits tied for third among NHL defensemen with 12 points. And his 12 assists trail only Cale Makar. I believe he's tied with Erik Karlsson of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and only Lane Hudson and Cale Makar have more points. In fact, Charlie McAvoy is on pace to record 62 assists this season, and that alone would be good enough to set a new career high in points, and that's without even scoring a goal. 0 goals so far. His shooting percentage for his career is 6.9. So you got to figure if he keeps firing the puck, those goals will come at some point. But even just based on assists alone, he has been prolific enough to be on pace to set a new career high in points with 62. He does have how many shots does McAvoy have? He's got 21 shots right now through 16 games. So he's not shooting at like a high level, but still, you figure he's good for, say, 5%. He should have at least one goal to his credit right now, maybe a couple if he keeps firing, getting some power play time. But still, the assist rate is huge, and he's getting enough to be on pace for a career high. And we've talked, every dayers will remember that on the podcast, I've mentioned how Charlie McAvoy is kind of outside of that Norris Trophy conversation because he's not usually among the top point generators from the blue line. This season so far, he is. And if this defensive turnaround sticks, if the Bruins can continue to maximize that Zadorov McAvoy pairing, then he could be in that conversation coming up as the season goes along. Now, this 5-game win streak has also coincided with the benching of Mason Lohrei. And we're not here to say that Mason Lohrei was the reason why the Bruins were struggling defensively early on. And I still believe he's an asset to this team and should be in the lineup. But the emergence of Jonathan Aspiro, 26-year-old career AHLer, who was originally signed by the Ottawa Senators as an undrafted defenseman, he solidified the third pair with Henri Jokiharju. And Marco Sturm praised his quick closing speed and competitiveness, calling him a natural fit for the Bruins' defensive mindset. It really makes you think about yesterday's conversation on the podcast about where Mason Lohrei fits on this team right now. Clearly, it's in the press box. They're not going to make any changes while the team is on this win streak. If Aspiro is a natural fit for the Bruins' defensive mindset, you have Jordan Harris, who's injured, waiting to come back when he's healthy. Does that lend to the Bruins taking some calls on Charlie McAvoy and what his future with the team may be? The stars are really stepping up for this team so far this season. Charlie McAvoy, 6 points in his last 5 games, 12 total, second in defense, assists league-wide. Hampus Lindholm, +6 goal differential when he's on the ice since his return. Pavel Zacha now up to 14 points in 16 games. He set a career high a couple seasons ago, playing in the top 6 for the Bruins after the retirements of Patrice, Bergeron, and David Krejci. He's on pace for 72 points at the moment, which would smash his career high of 59. I stupidly dropped him in my fantasy keeper league. Let's not talk about that. Had to diversify my salary cap allotments. Anyways, he's been unreal. Andrew Peeke actually had 2 assists last night, including the rebound that led to Morgan Geeky's team-leading 10th goal. 10 goals on November 7th. He didn't reach that mark until January last season. And then he went on to finish with a career-high 33. He's on pace to absolutely smash that, although his shooting percentage still a bit elevated. Now, in the previous 4 games that the Bruins had won during the streak, they had been outchanced, outshot. Last night, though, they dominated. 56% of the shot attempts, 61% of the shots at 5-on-5, 55% of the high danger chances, and they dominated in terms of expected goals. It was a bit tighter when it came to overall situations because Ottawa had some power play opportunities. Scoring chances were 50-50. Shots 25-22 in favor of the Bruins. But unlike the last game against Ottawa, they killed all those penalties and were able to come out with the win. And after the win, Andrew Peeke earned the Bruins' new Grinder Award, a player-created nightly honor recognizing whoever best embodies the team's grind. And Sturm said this organically came from the players. And even David Pastrnak said he wants it. Not typically known for his grind, but this shows the team is buying in. They want to be known as guys who are doing the dirty work and helping the team win. Peeke won it after taking a hard hit, which he had to momentarily take a breather. He blocked a shot with his hand, 2 assists, and he almost had that goal on the Geeky one because it was a rifle off the crossbar that just bounced down, gift wrapped for Geeky to tap in. And that's the tone setter for the modern Bruins. Star talent balanced by a collective, player-driven accountability. They've got guys who are producing. Pastrnak, 18 points. Zacha, 14 points. On track for career highs. Geeky, same thing. Charlie McAvoy. And they've been without Elias Lindholm for the past few games, who still sits 5th on the team in scoring, tied with Casey Mittelstadt. 9 points in 13 games for Lindholm. Mittelstadt, 9 points in 15 games. Victor Arvidsson coming alive after a slow start. It was Tanner Jeannot and Sean Kuraly who connected on a goal last night. Just great contributions up and down the lineup as Fraser Minton, Murat Husnudinov continue to acclimate themselves as younger players. They got a big test coming up on Saturday against the Maple Leafs, and that's a game we'll preview here as the podcast continues. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride that hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. You can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And of course, it's not just for the NBA. You can get in on the action, the NHL, and the NFL. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Saturday night's game in Toronto is pretty big, obviously, because the Bruins are aiming to extend their winning streak. It's a rivalry game. It's on Hockey Night in Canada, but it's also the prelude to the Hockey Hall of Fame festivities, which will be taking place next week. Zdeno Chara will be honored, as will Joe Thornton, two captains in Boston Bruins history. Obviously, Zdeno Chara having a bigger impact. And Patrice Bergeron wrote a moving tribute to his former captain for NHL.com. I highly recommend you check it out. Bergeron wrote that when Chara arrived in 2006, I remember exactly where I was, July 1st of that year when the Bruins signed both Chara and Marc Savard. And Bergeron wrote, Chara's presence gave Bruins fans something they hadn't felt in a while. Hope. Chara treated his body like a temple, trained like a machine, studied the game like a perfect student, and his leadership brought back a team-first mentality and accountability. Those two guys were teammates for 14 seasons, reached the Stanley Cup final 3 times, won in 2011, and Bergeron said Chara's true legacy was how he made everyone around him better. Chara's back in an official capacity with his team as a player development advisor, as a mentor, and we'll see what impact he has on this group. But Saturday's game will be a celebration of what Boston built and what they're still trying to uphold. Chara and Bergeron, who will be a Hall of Famer at first vote, they defined professionalism, defense, leadership. Marco Sturm, who played with both those guys, he's trying to build a Bruins team that lives up to that standard, albeit with not the same talent level that team had. As Bergeron wrote, Z challenged and inspired us to prepare harder, to lead more intentionally. He showed everyone what it means to be a pro. Saturday's game is a perfect stage for the new Bruins to show that those values, discipline, buy-in, accountability, that grind are alive and well. Now, it's going to be a tough test for the Bruins. First of 3 meetings between these two teams. They'll play again in a few days, November 11th. The Leafs had been struggling a bit. They've now won 3 in a row and 5 of their past 6, including wins over Philly, Pittsburgh, and most recently over the Utah Mammoth. The Bruins, of course, 5 wins in a row, 6 of their last 7 as well. So pretty hot coming in here. A marquee matchup on Saturday night. Matthew Knies leads the way for the Leafs over their past 5 games with 5 assists and 8 points. Auston Matthews with 3 goals for the Maple Leafs. He's got 8 on the season, 2 behind Boston's Morgan Geeky. So who's the elite superstar here in this scenario? When it comes to power play, Toronto really struggling. They rank 30th. Boston's penalty kill is now up to 9th. So perhaps that's an area where they can succeed. Boston's power play is 14th. Toronto's penalty kill is also 9th. Boston and Toronto have equal 83.3% penalty kills at the moment. They're also pretty even in terms of faceoffs. Toronto ranks third. The Bruins rank fourth. Faceoffs possession will be a key thing in this game. The Maple Leafs, one of the highest scoring teams in the NHL, so Jeremy Swayman and this new defensive structure will be tested. 3.71 goals per game. The Leafs are averaging. They're allowing, though, 3.57 goals per game, which is 28th. The Bruins 14th in scoring, 24th in overall team defense, but that is indeed rising. Anthony Stolarz, 6-4-1 for the Leafs with an .895 save percentage. Jeremy Swayman, 5-4 with an .897 save percentage. Leafs are led in scoring by William Nylander, 14 points in 11 games, followed by, he's got 20 points in 11 games, 14 assists. Matthew Knies with 18 points. John Tavares, 18 points. Matthews, well back with only 12 points. And the depth is struggling. No Mitch Marner, of course. Matthias Maselli, Nick Robertson, Max Domi only with 4 points. On the blue line, Morgan Riley leading the way with 10 points. Oliver Ekman-Larsson with 9. Huge game on tap for our Boston Bruins. Again, Hall of Fame game. Both Zdeno Chara and Joe Thornton will be honored prior to this one. And the Bruins are actually ahead of Toronto now in terms of points. They're 1 point ahead, but they have 2 more games played. Toronto with a .607 point percentage to sit truly in third in the Atlantic, trailing Montreal and Detroit. And Tampa sitting between Toronto and Boston. Boston is 5th in terms of point percentage now after being in the bottom just a few days ago. .563 point percentage ahead of Florida, ahead of Ottawa, and ahead of Buffalo. And in the Eastern Conference, the Bruins are ahead of a number of teams now. They were down at the bottom as the only team at 500, like the beginning of this week. Now they're ahead of the Islanders, the Blue Jackets, the Capitals, the Panthers, the Senators, the Rangers, the Sabres. Still have some work to do to get that goal differential up. They're at -1. But the hottest team in the East with 5 wins in a row and tied with the Anaheim Ducks for the longest current win streak around the NHL. So great results from the Bruins. Tough for Mason Lohrei to be sitting in the press box watching this. You have to wonder where his mindset is at, what Don Sweeney's thinking as the Bruins succeed without him. Another note, John Beecher did leave last night's game with an upper body injury. So with Lindholm out, Elias and Beecher out, we may see Jeffrey Viel come into the lineup, or we may see someone called up from Providence if either of those guys land on IR. They haven't called anybody up yet because Lindholm technically not on injured reserve, but he is week to week. So keep an eye on that. If there is a prominent recall, I'll be sure to post a TikTok reel. You're going to want to follow along on all of those platforms to get the very latest on the Boston Bruins. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, friends. Please do check out the Locked On NHL Game Night podcast next. Every game, every night, analyzed until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Find it on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel and on your favorite podcast app. Everydayers know that the best way to keep up with Locked On Boston Bruins is to do the same. Please take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.